Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me for our webinar series, Using Ergonomics to Manage Injuries, a Wise Return on Investment. My name is Sue Tomich, and I will be your guest speaker. We have all been told that we can prevent injuries through ergonomic principles and interventions, but what happens when the injury still occurs? Ergonomics can assist with management of the injury as well. Today's presentation will cover injury management, including effectively communicating with your claims and loss control representatives, investigating the mechanism of injury, and communicating with the physician, and ensuring a safe return to work to mitigate future risk. We will discuss the two ways to deal with injuries: prevention and management. We will develop a roadmap as a systematic approach to ergonomic risk mitigation, including communication with your workers' comp claims rep and your loss control rep, as well as communication with the medical community and your employees. Then we will provide some real-life examples of how ergonomics was used to manage injuries and why this is a wise return on investment. There are only two things you can do with employee injuries: prevent them by taking a proactive approach with safety, engineering, and ergonomics, or manage them after they occur. Here, ergonomics can assist with return to work, mechanism of injury investigation, and ensuring risks are eliminated for the future. Argent is here to assist you with these approaches, as your employees are your most valuable asset. There are two basic approaches that we see. We hear about post-offer testing that incorporates physical aspects of the job's essential functions. For example, if the employee has to lift 75 pounds as a part of their normal job duties, they are tested to see if they can actually lift 75 pounds. I have two immediate questions. One, is lifting 75 pounds a safe practice? Think about that. How does lifting 75 pounds affect the body? And two, what happens if the individual can't pass the lift test? In other words, does anyone ever fail your test? And if they can't pass, what controls do you have in place to still allow them to do that job safely? I have worked with one company that has a 100-pound lift requirement. However, in their testing, no one has ever failed the test. I find that hard to believe because research data indicates that less than 10% of the male population can lift 100 pounds from the floor. In my opinion, making the job fit your working population is a safer and more productive way to go about designing your workplace. The goals of ergonomics are very simple. We design for 75% of the population to safely perform or access the job tasks. We want to decrease the risk of injury while increasing productivity and quality. We also want to eliminate those worker selection methods by increasing ease and capability for more of your working population to do the job safely. Ergonomics is also a more cost-effective approach to designing jobs. When you design to fit the workers, you automatically increase safety and comfort, which in turn increases employee morale. So another byproduct for all of the goals of ergonomics is retention of your workforce. This, of course, translates into a cost savings on training while developing competence and expertise. When we talk about preventing injuries, we can also see the progression of severity in line with the increase of cost. This is why we want to encourage early reporting and investigation. Our goal is to never let things progress beyond discomfort and fatigue. According to the National Council on Compensation Insurance, 75% of total claims from data collected between 1993 and 2010 from 38 states were medical only and cost 7% of that total pie. On the other hand, 25% of claims were lost time claims and resulted in 93% of the cost. The indirect costs associated with injuries can be 7 to 10 times higher than medical costs alone. We'll talk about that more in a few more slides. This chart is from the Workers' Compensation Research Institute from July of 2017. The study notes that there has been a steady, slow decrease in number of injuries since 2012, but costs continue to rise. This chart shows a little bit of the reason why. It shows a comparison of cumulative growth in price of medical services from 2008 to 2016. This is anticipated to continue to rise. Here you can see the average cost of claims across those 38 states from that NCCI study. It's clear that those indirect costs substantially impact the total cost of the claim by looking at the total indemnity and perm partial and perm total columns. When they impact the cost of the claim, they also impact your workers' compensation mods and premiums, which at the end of the day impact your company's profitability. Why ergonomics? Do we really even have to ask why? Ergonomics-related injuries typically account for 40 to 60% of all work comp injuries and 50 to 75% of all work comp costs. Our workforce is our #1 company asset. Just as we have to maintain our machines, we have to maintain our workforce. Nationally, OSHA reports that 48% of all work comp injuries are ergonomic in nature. So that falls right between that 40 to 60% of all the other studies. Indirect costs, as we mentioned before, are 4 to 10 times the medical costs. Indirect costs include loss of production, loss of a productive employee, cost of damaged goods, tools, and equipment, employee time involved in investigation, paperwork, training, and replacement workers, overtime to cover injured employees, and time to hire new employees. It is estimated that indirect costs to the company are $4 to $10 for every $1 of actual claim cost. OSHA even states that indirect costs may be as high as a 20-to-1 ratio. This is an argument for not only a strong safety and ergonomic approach to the company culture, but also a solid return to work program, using ergonomics to ensure that the injured employee does not work outside of his or her restrictions. There are many different approaches you can take to incorporating ergonomics into your safety culture. Regardless of how comprehensive your approach, there are two key elements that need to exist. Those are management commitment and employee involvement. Management commitment includes components such as developing a team approach, having a decision maker involved as part of the process, giving decision-making authority to the team supported by top management, holding team members accountable for assessing and making changes, and holding regular team meetings to review, brainstorm, and prioritize the changes you want to make. Employee involvement should involve developing an avenue or process to encourage early reporting of symptoms or issues. This gives the opportunity to effect change before it becomes a work comp claim and requires medical involvement. It also involves encouraging employees' involvement on a team. The written program and program review can mean a lot of different things and be very different from company to company. What is also important, though, is whatever you do, that it is not a one and done type of thing. This is an ongoing process that needs to be reevaluated and taken care of all year long. Let's talk about communication. By encouraging the avenue for reporting symptoms and holding team members accountable for change, we have to have a good process to investigate the issues. We need communication, both internally and externally, especially when there is a report of injury. When an injury does occur, we need to not only communicate with the employee, but also the work comp insurance claims rep. The more comprehensive the information, the better the ability to manage and/or defend that claim. The information is also essential to communicate with the treating physician. The bottom line is that you need to have a good accident investigation process and program. Whether it's just an employee complaint about symptoms or whether it's an actual event or injury, the more information you can gather and objectify, the better your claims people will have to manage that claim. If you need guidance in accident investigation, please contact your loss control rep for assistance. So there are differences not only in programs and processes, but there's also differences between communication tools. What are those tools? Well, we have different tools we can use in ergonomics. These are based on what we're investigating or the purpose of the investigation. Regardless of the tool, there are common elements that need to be identified, collected, and quantified. These include things like heights, weights, posture, forces, duration, frequency, workload, lighting, worker attitude, temperature, symptoms reported, worker suggestions, injuries, and video footage as well as photos. A traditional job analysis is one communication tool that your company can use to relay information. These reports describe the physical activities that are required to perform the essential functions of a job. Now, essential functions are determined by each employer. These are the functions that the employee has to be able to do that job and are not easily substituted. These reports look at objective information. They do not look at the effect of those tasks and activities on the worker and whether or not the activities are causing an injury. But they do paint a picture for the treating physician and allow them to make decisions on work restrictions. It's helpful to have these activities quantified. For example, lifting 30-pound boxes from the floor 6 times per hour is a very specific quantity with frequency and weight associated with it. Not many job descriptions do this in a very meaningful way, so you have to be very careful of providing enough information. Again, even the best quantifications cannot predict the risk level of the job. So it doesn't look at the interaction between the essential function, the force, the height, the frequency, the duration. All of those characteristics and what it does to the human body. That is where ergonomic assessment comes in. Ergonomic assessments take the information gathered one step further by looking at the relationships of the task and how it impacts the human body, and ultimately renders a score that is then interpreted as safe or hazardous. You might hear terms like strain index, revised NIOSH lifting guide, three-dimensional biomechanical model, ACGIH threshold limit value for hand activity level, energy expenditure. That might all sound like gobbledygook, but to anyone in ergonomics, these are the tools of the trade. And they quantify the effect of the known epidemiological risk factors from the literature on the body. Interpretation of these tests is important. Ask about the level of training that the ergonomic consultants have that are doing your assessments for you. Ergonomic tools are not foolproof. They're widely used, they're respected, but they're not foolproof. That is why interpretation is of paramount importance. According to the law, only a medical physician can determine causation of injury. However, ergonomic reports look at mechanism of injury and have been used to supply the physician with the complete picture. For example, everybody always talks about repetition causing carpal tunnel syndrome. This is not necessarily true. Just because there is a presence of risk factors doesn't necessarily mean it's going to lead to an injury. Certain combinations of risk factors may be a problem, and ergonomic analyses can show the presence of risk factors, but they can also show the lack of risk factors, and we can quantify that as well. What are ergonomic risk factors? They are the elements of a task that increase the likelihood of the development of a work-related injury. We always start by looking at force. This is the driving factor found in the epidemiologic literature. Once we determine if force is an issue, then we look at posture and frequency or repetition to see if they increase or reduce the effect of force. Now, if force isn't an issue, we can still look at posture and repetition to see if those in combination or by themselves cause a problem. Let's illustrate some of these points with real-life cases and how they affected the company with prevention or management. This is a photo of workers dumping boxes of apples that weigh 40 to 50 pounds each. There's a large volume of apples that comes through the line on a daily basis. Each worker unloads approximately 10 skids per shift. Workers alternate skids, which provides them with some recovery time to help combat fatigue. However, regardless of the recovery time, when dumping, workers lift and carry an average of 3 40-pound boxes per minute. The box height is between hip height and over the shoulder. The boxes have cutout handles, but toward the end of the pallet, the boxes are lifted up and over the railing of the catwalk where the worker is standing. The worker must also reach for boxes that are approximately 24 inches from their body at full arm's length to pull them closer prior to lifting them. The worker then turns 180 degrees to dump the box into a chute, which is the picture on the right, at approximately mid-chest height. So if we look at those communication tools, this is using a simple ergonomic checklist to identify known risk factors which shows that this job is at least an overall moderate risk for low back, shoulder, elbow, hand, and wrist injury. This is based on risk factors that we know to exist because of different research. So for this example, we took it one step further here, and we applied the revised NIOSH lifting equation as an ergonomic analysis tool. Applying the tool and doing the analysis demonstrates how those tasks impact the worker. You can download this free app, the NLE Calc. You can see that right on the top of your slide. It was developed by the Centers for Disease Control, CDC, so this is a free app, and it really does a pretty good job with accurately figuring out what the lifting index is. This calculation from the NIOSH lifting equation takes into account force, which is the weight, posture, the horizontal and vertical distances there, and repetition, which is the frequency of lifts per minute, to do this calculation. It shows that the lifting index is 2.6. Now, it doesn't mean anything unless you know that anything above a 1.0 with this calculation is considered hazardous for the back. This means that less than 75% of the male and female populations can safely perform this task of lifting those boxes of apples. In fact, some argue that any score above a lifting index of 2.0 renders the worker 3 times more likely to experience a back injury. So, how do we reduce the risk before an injury occurs? We can make recommendations, but those recommendations have to make sense. You need to work as a team to make sure that providing a solution for one issue does not cause other issues. You also have to understand exactly what the production schedule looks like and what the other factors are around that job to make sure that you don't add risk in a different place by eliminating it here. So to instantly lower the risk of this job, we could do things like provide a conveyor arm that is on a hinge and covers the gap of 36 inches between the skid, where the apple boxes are lifted from, and the dumping station. It should preferably be spring-loaded to mechanically assist with the dumping by way of a shift in weight on the conveyor without the need for the worker to lift it. This instantly eliminates twisting and carrying. To further lower the risk of the shoulder, a rotating skid mechanism could be added to eliminate reaching greater than 18 inches from the body. Investigation into pricing for such an addition would determine if it's possible. And also, adding an anti-fatigue mat would also make the platform surface more comfortable for the workers and reduce possible fatigue. So after we institute those recommendations, we can look at that same checklist and see that now we've taken that moderate to actually high-risk job, according to the revised NIOSH lifting index, and we've made it a low job risk for injury. We've eliminated most of those risk factors. And when we redo the calculation, we can see that we have a lifting index score below 1.0, which makes it safe for at least 75% of the female population and 99% of males. Here's a different communication tool. This is the start of our second example here. This is a functional job description. It tells the reader how much is lifted, how often it is lifted, and from where it is lifted. This is an excellent tool to communicate with the treating physician for return to work. However, again, it does not show the effect of any of the job functional demands on the worker's body. And if we're talking lifting from the floor, that would be the back. So here you can clearly see that occasionally we're lifting 11 to 50 pounds from the floor. Nothing over 51 pounds is ever lifted. If we analyze that with a little different method, this is the two-dimensional biomechanical model. We're looking at that 21 to 50 pound category here, lifting from the floor. We can see that only 28% of males and 2% of females are capable of lifting in this set of circumstances. The lifting index is 2.94, and the recommended weight limit would be not to exceed lifting 10.2 pounds from this position. What's the recommendation? Well, it's an ergo opportunity here. Maybe we recommend a lifting device to get the load that you're lifting off of the floor level. If we redo those calculations, we can clearly see that the compressive force has decreased, and now your male population and female population are both in excess of 75%, which is our goal for designing jobs. How does this communicate? This shows here that there is a risk, and it clearly shows here that we've mitigated that risk by engineering it out. Here's another analysis. This is flipping shells. These are large sheets that are part of work cell cubicles, office cubicles. The three-dimensional biomechanical model was used to analyze the task of lifting a 50-pound shell, which is the dimensions of 60 inches by 120 inches, from a horizontal position to a vertical position. The 3D model looks at a task as a snapshot in time and doesn't incorporate all the duration, but it's one of the best models we have to look at shoulder concerns and strength capabilities. We not only looked at the 3D biomechanical model when we looked at that job, but we also looked at shoulder torque and what is allowable. Now, this is based on research data, and it shows us that approximately 48% of the male population is able to perform this task safely. The risk is largely due to the position of the load during the lift and the weight lifted. Anytime the hands are positioned outside the width of the body or the shoulders, lifting strength significantly decreases. the torque produced on the shoulder joints in conjunction with lifting a heavy load exceeds ergonomic design limits for the male population. Risk also increases due to the unstable load. It's flimsy, so it's not stable. To completely eliminate the risk associated with flipping shelves, the company should implement an automated tilt or flip table between the wheeled cart and the work table. To decrease the risk associated with flipping shelves, they could incorporate vertical placement of shelves on an adjustable height cart. Workers would be required to grasp the shell from the cart and position the shell on the work table, but not flip it. The 3D model analysis is not shown here, but it is an agreement that the 25-pound lift is 50-pound total with 2 people. Under the given set of circumstances is only safe for approximately 48% of the male population, so virtually less than 24% of females. This is an example of a full-time employee with bilateral carpal tunnel syndrome and ulnar nerve issues. She's a 39-year-old female who is 5 feet 5 inches and 185 pounds. She stated in her original complaint that the repetitive motion of rolling items in bubble wrap, making boxes, packing items, adding peanuts, and using the left hand to keep the box closed while she tapes it with her right hand is the cause of her issues. Now, claims alerted loss control of this injury. We discussed this, and we went in to do an ergonomic assessment to look at mechanism of injury. Are the tasks that she's performing enough to have caused this injury? That's pretty much what we're looking for. Are there risk factors that could have led to bilateral carpal tunnel syndrome, or are they not there? So for this assessment, we use something called the strain index. Analysis here shows there is very low ergonomic risk of distal upper extremity injury. The factors that were contributing to this conclusion include light to moderate grip and pinch of short duration and short frequency, frequent short rest breaks, ample recovery time between packaging items, and really using the tape gun is really led by the shoulder muscles. So the generated force comes from the shoulder, not the wrist and hand. We also looked at that same job using the TLV for HAL, and it's in agreement with the strain index, showing that the tasks fall below the action limit. So this was one report that was used to deny this claim. So the outcome of the claim was that it was closed. The report was used in a records review, and the claim was fully denied based on the physician's opinion. Initially, there was $30,000 in reserves for a bilateral carpal tunnel surgery. and we had hard cost savings of $18,000 and soft cost savings of $1,500, avoiding the IME. So the total cost savings using ergonomics was $19,500. Now, because we were able to deny that claim, we saved on the mod and premium costs. If this claim would have gone through as a bilateral carpal tunnel and we would have paid it out, it would have affected that company's premium costs for the next 3 years. Not only would they have paid for the injury the current year, but it would have incurred additional costs for the next 3 years, up to $29,842. The impact on the mod would have been 7.1 points. So we were, because of a full denial, we were able to save 100% on this claim. Doesn't always work that way, but this is just one example of how the absence of risk factors can lead to that communication of good accident investigation and working with work comp and loss control can lead to a savings. Here's another claim. This worker claimed left carpal tunnel syndrome. She had already had right carpal tunnel surgery at a previous employer. She's 5 feet 1 inch tall and is right hand dominant. She has a history of smoking. She's worked in the packing department since April of 2014, and she had already had right carpal tunnel surgery. She pulls parts for one order at a time and then pushes her cart back to the packaging area where she forms one box at a time, filling it as she goes. Most parts are less than 2 pounds in weight. Occasionally, she will work with parts that are 5 pounds. Boxes are very thin and require very little pinch and grip force, less than 10% of maximal force. When each part is boxed, she will form a larger box and fill it. So she takes these little boxes then and puts them into a larger shipping box. A tape machine is used to secure the box. She will then slide the box onto a counter and a coworker lifted them for shipping. Again, the strain index was used and shows relatively low risk for the development of distal upper extremity injuries. The estimated cost of the ergo assessment were $828. That includes travel time, report writing time, and that is all part of our claims process. It does not go back to the employer in any way. But we were able to, with the report, deny the carpal tunnel surgery due to lack of evidence of mechanism of injury. And we only treated conservatively with physical therapy. So the total cost savings on this claim was $11,200. And again, you see the impact on the mod over a 3-year span. Here's our last example. This is an assembly line. However, this worker, even though they have rotation, chose only to do packaging. So he was basically at this end point of the line for at least 4 hours a day. He was not allowed to exceed 4 hours per shift at this rotation. The heaviest tube on the line weighs 19.75 pounds. Each worker would load approximately 16 of these tubes each hour. So looking at the revised NIOSH lifting index again, we did several analyses which are called composite lifting calculations, because he doesn't always lift from the same height into the same height. In other words, he loads the bin from the bottom to the top. So we looked at all of the different work that he does on that bin, in that bin. It shows, the calculation shows, that there's a relatively low risk of low back injury for this task. And under the given set of parameters for both a 2-hour and a 4-hour rotation, that holds true. It should be noted that the calculations are based on the measurements taken when the weight is either picked up or set down, and does not account for the flexed trunk posture that occurs after the weight is released. Okay? So calculations were based on multiple lifts at different layers and multiple different reaches. The calculations also show that there is a relatively low risk of injury for the low back when performing the unloading on another line that he worked on as well. So estimated ergo cost, this was a little bit more involved. It was about $2,400. But we were able to totally deny a low back claim that was slated to become a total permanent disability. The ergonomics report was cited in the medical opinion and then again in the judgment during court. Total exposure on the case was $354,000. Total cost savings just on ergonomics was $100,000, and actually total cost savings on everything working together with claims was that whole kit and caboodle of $354,000. Without that ergo assessment and without fighting that claim, we would have had a lot more being paid out on this one injury for the next 3 years. So here was an ability for us to, again, communicate with claims, the employee, the account, loss control, a doctor that performed the IME, and an attorney and a law judge. We communicated with all of those people by doing these types of reports. So the interpretation on those tests is essential, and the way to use them to communicate is essential. For example, if we would have just used a job description, the doctor would have never been able to see the impact of the tasks that the worker was performing and how they related to his back injury. But with the ergonomic assessment, we could. If there wasn't a good accident investigation process from the employer at the beginning and they didn't question the claim, this would have never happened either. So it's a full circle of everyone working together to affect that. Any questions? We have seen that we can prevent injuries with ergonomics working together as a team, and we can manage them after they occur. We have talked about why early reporting and investigation of a complaint or an injury are important. We talked about what we look for when we're looking at mechanism of injury and how we use that when the account questions it or claims questions things, and how loss control works with them to get the information relayed through different communication tools to the physician, to the attorney, back to the employer, to a law judge. And all of these communication tools can also be used not only for return to work issues to make sure that employees are working within their restrictions and that we're fixing jobs, getting rid of the risk that we see so that we make them lower risk that allows our employees to get back to work, as well as looking for lack of mechanism of injury. Okay, if there are no questions at this time, we can end the presentation. It has been recorded and it will be available in about 2 weeks on WB Connect. If you think of any questions or would like me to specifically look at something you're questioning or you have concerns about or talk more about an ergonomics program at your facility, please feel free to contact me at any time. You can either do that via email or my cell phone number is also listed on there. We're here to support you and to help with managing your injuries. Thank you for your time today, and have a great rest of your week.